Welcome to channel. Today, we explore story filled with unexpected twists. Please, subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin. The plane landed at precisely 5:30 p.m., and at 6:05, I was standing outside my apartment building. The nighttime air was chilly, but the knot in my gut was scorching hot. I looked up to the sixth floor of my floor. Lauren, my wife, was behind one of those brightly illuminated windows, and she wasn't alone herself. Dylan was with her, her boyfriend, and the guy she chose to betray me with. I pictured them in my bed, laughing gently behind closed doors, utterly unconscious that I was present. I took a deep breath before reaching into my pocket for my phone. Someone else needed to know the truth, someone who, like me, had been caught off guard by those she trusted the most. I browsed through my contacts, located the name, and pushed the call button. Megan, I replied when she picked up, her voice crisp with interest. Megan? She welcomed Dylan's wife, Josh, with a small sharpness in her tone. Where are you? Outside my building, I answered, peering back up at the sixth-floor window. And your wife? She said, her tone laced with mistrust. With your husband, I said calmly. There was a pause. Are you mocking me? She inquired. Nope, I responded, shaking my head even though she couldn't see me. I'd never do that. Her quiet was short, but intentional. Then I detected a slight trace of a grin in her voice. So the plan is a go then? I couldn't help but grin back, even if she wasn't there to witness it. Yes, I said, tightening my grasp on the phone. I've got everything planned. I just need to put a few screws in place, and our little bomb is done. I hung up with Megan and called Lauren's phone. She picked up on the third ring, her voice full of honey. Hey, honey, she murmured, trying too hard. I faked a grin in my voice. Lauren, I answered. Her tone was tinged with fake longing. How long will you take? I'm dying without you. I couldn't help but laugh, the irony cutting hard. Oh, Lauren, I said casually. You don't die until I tell you to. By the way, I've got a surprise for you. I'm in the lobby, coming up. There was a brief gap, but it was long enough for me to notice. I noticed a tiny rustle in the background before she spoke again. Oh, you're early, she said, attempting to seem casual. I'm waiting for you. Good, I said and hung up. The foyer was silent as I approached the elevators. There were two of them, sleek silver doors that hummed quietly as they moved. I stood there, hands in pockets, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. Just as I had expected, the elevator on the left opened, revealing Dylan. He went outside, head down, fumbling with his garments. His shirt was not properly tucked, and his tie was somewhat skewed. He was attempting to mend it, but his hands fumbled with hurry. When he spotted me, his body froze for a second. He attempted to seem cool, glancing down and avoiding my eyes. I grinned. That's all I could do, grin. Because it was brutally clear at the time that he was nothing more than a thief, slipping off with something he did not own. Excuse me, mister, I said calmly, but loudly enough to halt him in his tracks. He paused mid-step and slowly turned to face me, his look something between remorse and terror. I went up to him and reached inside my pocket. You dropped your wallet, I said, handing it out. Dylan blinked, shocked for a second. He remained still, as if unable to absorb what I had just spoken. Then, with trembling hands, he accepted the wallet from me. Thanks, he said softly. I nodded, gave him one more glance, and then went away without saying anything. I entered the waiting elevator and hit the button for the 6th level. I opened the door and entered the flat. Everything looked just as I had left it, but it didn't feel the same. The air felt thick and heavy, with a tension that only I could sense. I moved inside the bedroom. The plush carpet muffled my footsteps. Lauren lay on the bed, dressed in lace underwear that left nothing to the imagination. She leaned back, her grin broad, her eyes attempting to sell me a dream I didn't want. Were you really that desperate for me, honey? I said, my tone light and even mischievous. Always, my love, she murmured, her grin unflinching. I moved closer to her, breathing deeply. There's a faint smell, I murmured, my eyes narrowing slightly. A man's smell. Her grin wavered briefly, and her body stiffened. I leaned in closer, letting the stillness linger. Oh, I said abruptly, standing up and grinning. You must have used my body spray. Relief rushed across her face so obviously that I almost chuckled. Yes, she said, her voice firm again. I thought it smelled nice. I paused for a second before taking a step back and nonchalantly surveyed the room. My gaze settled on the bed, and I cocked my head. Why is that part of the bed a bit wet? She froze, her fingers clenching on the blankets. I smiled again, maintaining an easy tone. You must have been working out, I added, pointing at her. To look this good for me. Lauren did not react. Is that a hickey on your neck? I said, leaning closer. She promptly stepped aside and replied, my allergies must have flared. I grinned and leaned back. I turned to fully face her, my grin dimming. You've been cheating on me while I've been away on business. I started, my voice calm and measured. Her face became white, and her eyes widened with surprise or remorse. She opened her lips, but the words didn't come immediately. When they did, they were aggressive and defensive. You think I'm a fool? She said, her voice quivering. I'm a loyal wife. Don't you dare accuse me of cheating. I smiled again, slowly and deliberately. You said you'd control your diet, I said casually. But I saw a pizza box on the dinner table. Her demeanor changed, and the fire in her eyes faded as she faked a faint grin. I'm sorry, she whispered softly, looking down. I nodded, pleased with her reply, and proceeded to the restroom to wash my hands. The cold water on my fingertips felt calming, in sharp contrast to the excitement surging through my blood. I looked at myself in the mirror, my lips curled into a little grin. I adored her expressions, the terror, the anxiety, the way she felt she was being apprehended. But I wasn't finished. I knew she was cheating from the moment she began, and all I had to do now was wait for the proper time. Lauren was sitting on the edge of the bed, her legs crossed, and her face plastered with a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes as I walked out of the bathroom. She glanced up at me as I approached and sat next to her. I have a meeting tomorrow, I added casually, keeping my tone neutral, so we'll be late coming home. She grinned, her face relaxing in apparent relief. Okay, she said, her voice pleasant. I glanced at her for a time, examining her expression, before curling my lips into a faint knowing grin. She had no recollection, not even a flash of recognition. 5th anniversary. They say only men think with their little heads, yet here I was, remembering and planning. Lauren didn't have a clue. I got up and stretched as if the topic wasn't important. They'll be late, I reiterated. The reality, however, was far more pleasant. I would be there just on time. This was the next step in my strategy, and everything was already in place. A few weeks back, I started a private messaging group. The members are my in-laws. I had them all promise that it would remain private. There were no leaks, no indications, and no word to Lauren about what I was preparing. I did not even explain why they were added to the group. Not till the last second. I just invited them to meet me at a motel near my house. And now, with the big day approaching, it was time to execute. I left my apartment early that evening, going calmly and steadily toward the Skyline Suites, which was just a few streets away. When I arrived, they were there waiting for me. Helen, my mother-in-law, rose up with a broad grin when I entered the hotel's private lounge. She extended her hand and shook mine firmly. Congratulations on the promotion, Ryan, and of course, happy 6th anniversary. My pleasure, I said, nodding cordially. Helen maintained a constant grin. My brother-in-law patted me on the back, and my 2 sister-in-laws hugged me quickly, their enthusiasm nearly palpable. I smiled broadly as I addressed the gathering once everyone had settled in. Here's the plan. We're heading to my place to surprise Lauren first, and then we'll all go out for a lavish dinner. Helen clenched her hands together, her eyes bright. You care so much for my daughter, she remarked. She's going to be moved to tears. I grinned and added, that's the whole idea. Move her to tears. My phone buzzed in my pocket as laughing filled the room. I took it out, knowing just who it would be, Megan. I went away from the gathering and responded quietly. He's in the house, Megan answered, her voice tense and clipped. Time to move. I smiled slightly, controlling the rush of excitement that usually occurs when everything falls into place. Got it, I responded and hung up. I returned to my in-laws, putting on the mask of a loyal spouse. All right, I shouted, putting my hands together, let's go. It's showtime. We all jumped into our vehicles, equipped with party poppers and the type of dizzying energy you'd expect at a surprise party. My brother-in-law and I both had cameras on hand, ready to capture every moment. When we arrived at the flat, I turned to the group and pressed a finger to my lips. All right, I said aloud, don't make any noise. She must be in the bedroom. I grabbed the door handle and carefully pulled it open. They all hurried in, excited. Their excitement virtually emanated from the walls. I waited behind them, strolling gently and appreciating the moment, like the quiet before the storm. When my 2 sister-in-laws walked into the living room, they immediately popped their party poppers. Confetti flooded the air, and they said, "Surprise." But the true surprise was not for Lauren, but for them. I was still standing just outside the doorway when I heard two deafening screams. One was clearly Lauren. The other was Helen. Then I saw Evan, my brother-in-law, coming toward me, his face pallid, but his eyes brimming with a weird combination of surprise and joy. "This is a crazy situation," he said quietly, attempting to regain his breath. Evan was grasping his phone fiercely, and it didn't take me long to figure out what he meant. He had been live-streaming the whole incident on his blog. Of course, he was all about the hits, views, and commotion. It was just too wonderful for him to pass up. I gave a soft giggle. "Must be getting some crazy views right now," I said, my tone even. Evan nodded, his cheeks twitching as he attempted to hide a nervous smile. "You have no idea." I did not react. Instead, I strolled gently past him into the bedroom, my stride steady and leisurely. When I got to the doorway, I paused for a second to take it all in. The setting was crazy. When I entered the bedroom, the commotion was in full flow. Helen, my mother-in-law, was punching Dylan with the accuracy and ferocity of a trained Marine. Each strike landed with a horrible thud, and Dylan, curled up on the floor, could do nothing except protect himself from the assault. My father-in-law, David, had Lauren trapped on the bed. Her face was pale and filled with anxiety. David's comments pierced through the air like blades. "You disgust me," he said. "After everything Ryan has done for you, this is how you repay him?" I swiftly went into the room, keeping my voice calm and steady despite the storm rising around me. "David, Helen, stop for a second," I murmured. But they were too preoccupied with their wrath. I approached Lauren, who was immobilized in horror. Her wide eyes moved between her parents and myself. I sat on the bed next to her and threw my arms around her shaking body. "Lauren," I murmured softly, my voice low enough to get her attention. "Did he force himself on you, dear? Tell me the truth." Her lips opened, but no sound emerged. I shook my head and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I know your parents raised you better than this. Lauren, please tell me the truth. Did he force himself on you?" Dylan, lying on the floor, managed to utter a sound of astonishment. His bloated face turned toward me, but he remained mute. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Evan, my brother-in-law, standing at the doorway, his phone still in hand. His live stream was documenting every aspect of this chaos. Brian, my other brother-in-law, was the only one who seemed to maintain his composure at the moment. He promptly took out his phone and phoned 911. "We need the cops here now," he murmured into the phone, exiting the room to transmit the location. By the time I returned my attention to David, he was still fighting, his fist flying furiously. Dylan's efforts to shelter himself weakened, and each impact resonated across the room. Minutes later, the front door burst open, accompanied by the distinct sound of heavy boots. The police were here. It took 2 cops to remove David off Dylan, but he was still attempting to deliver punches. His wrath had not subsided. He yelled, cursed, and demanded Dylan explain himself. David was eventually removed from Dylan, but even as they hauled him back, his eyes were filled with rage, and he seemed ready to lunge again. I clutched Lauren closer as the police attempted to make sense of the mayhem that was occurring around them. My voice softened, filled with worry. "Lauren, please, just tell them the truth. Did he force himself on you? I'll make sure you're safe. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Her tear-filled eyes met mine. She seemed besieged, like a caged animal urgently for a way out. I could feel her determination slipping away, the weight of guilt pushing down on her. She was about to give in when Dylan, bruised and bleeding, found his voice. No, that's not what happened," he said, fighting to sit up. His remarks were desperate, begging. "We know each other. She invited me here to have sex with me. Lauren, tell them the truth. You called me. Don't let them pin this on me." The room became quiet. All eyes were on Lauren. Her lips quivered as she opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her guilt was etched on her face. I turned my head slowly, peering at Dylan with a serene gaze that I knew would frighten him more than any explosion could. "Dylan," I responded quietly, "you've said enough." Then I stood up, smoothing out my shirt and taking a step back to look at the mess in front of me. You see, when a man finds out his wife is cheating, there are usually 3 roads he can take. The first is rage, a mad fury that leads him to beat the living daylights out of the lover, like David did. It's raw, it's primal, but it's fleeting. The second is heartbreak. A man breaks down, cries, and desperately tries to salvage what little remains of his marriage. He forgives. I hesitated, my voice lowering. You see, I'm not here to cry, or beg, or scream. I'm here to make sure that neither Lauren nor Dylan ever forgets this day. Because I'm an evil man, and I'm out for revenge of a different magnitude. I stood there, watching the catastrophe unfold like a director directing a devastation symphony. My heart didn't hurt, or even flinch. This was precisely the crescendo I had planned, and Lauren, in her hubris and desperation, played her role flawlessly. Dylan, sad as ever, gripped Lauren's shaking hands, his eyes flitting frantically between me, David, and the police officers who remained in the room. You know the truth, Lauren, he said softly, his voice quivering. Do the right thing. I observed her intently, my face serene but my thoughts acute. This was her moment of truth. Would she put everything on the line for her lover, or would she cling to the artificial veneer of her marriage? Lauren turned her eyes flaming with fury and stated, with a broken but unwavering voice, it was consensual. I called him here. The room erupted. Helen, her face flushed with rage, marched up to Lauren and slapped her across the face in a single harsh move. Lauren fell backward, catching herself on the bedpost, her face red and puffy. You ungrateful little witch, Helen said, her voice shaking with wrath. But Lauren refused to back down. No, not my Lauren, she yelled back, her voice caustic and loud enough to drown out her shocked family's gasps. I don't love Ryan. I love Dylan. He is my first love, and I will go with him. Her words boomed around the room, like a gunshot. David, the once proud ex-Marine, remained still, his head down in humiliation. I put a firm hand on his shoulder, pressing gently as if to console him, despite the fact that my own heart was quiet and cold as stone. It's okay, I murmured quietly, my voice calm and measured, as if I had anticipated it all along, which I had. Lauren raised her voice again, trembling, with a sense of rage and victory. I married this loser because he had a stable job and could provide. That's it, she said, her remarks venomous. Now that it's out in the open, I no longer wish to stay with Ryan. David cringed as she spoke, his shoulders sinking more beneath the weight of his daughter's treachery. Lauren straightened, her defiance rekindled. Dylan married during our breakup, but he's back now, she added, her voice softening as she gazed at him with what I could only characterize as naive love. He will make his wife now. The officers had had enough and departed. Lauren's comment struck me like a freight train, but I didn't flinch, not visibly, either. Did you really think I loved you? I snarled, my voice tinged with contempt. I thought so, I said gently, my voice firm despite the fury roaring within me. She laughed harshly and shook her head. Listen, you dumb idiot, she said, her words laced with anger. 2 years ago, I was pregnant with your child. As she spoke, time seemed to slow, and the words spilled forth like poison. I didn't want it, so I aborted it. It seemed as if the earth underneath me had been torn away. I did not know. I had no clue. My chest clenched, but I refused to let the agony show, not now, and not in front of her. She gazed at me, her eyes icy and emotionless. Okay, I did you dirty. I aborted your child. Now let's settle this, she continued, her voice turning into a farce of reason. I'll give you a divorce, and I don't want anything from you. Dylan is wealthy and can care for me. Before I could react, David lifted his hand, his expression distorted with anger and despair. I've heard enough, he responded, his voice solid but wavering. All my life, I've lived with values I believed in, honor, respect, and family. But I failed to raise a good daughter. He turned to me, his eyes filled with guilt. I'm sorry, Ryan. Truly I am. His statements imparted a sense of finality. He straightened himself and returned his gaze to Lauren, who remained still, her confidence crumbling. From this day forward, I no longer have a daughter, David stated, his voice stern. By tomorrow, you will no longer be part of this family. The hush that followed was deafening. Lauren's resistance was replaced by astonished quiet as her relatives started to leave the home one by one. David was the first to go, his steps firm yet heavy with the weight of his choice. Helen followed, her face pale and her eyes full with sorrow, but she did not say anything further. Evan and the others didn't glance back, and they were gone. Lauren's gaze altered as she stood in front of me, something cold and calculated in her eyes. I knew what would happen next. She was making her move, and I was expecting it. I knew the lawyer she was seeing, her so-called rescuer. In truth, he was a boyhood buddy. The irony was not lost on me. He had violated every professional rule to help me, but I knew deep down that he valued our relationship much more than the money he might have earned from this case. She gave me the divorce papers, and I recognized the familiar handwriting. Her conditions were as liberal as she could manage. She left with $8,000, and that was all. Nothing more, no assets, no property. I couldn't help but feel satisfied. That was the least she deserved. I took the documents, feeling the weight of the situation, yet I remained emotionless. "I'll have my lawyer get this processed further," I answered without hesitation. As I turned to go, I felt Dylan's gaze on me. His expression was arrogant as he crossed his arms and leaned back slightly. He was waiting for his chance to gloat. Then he couldn't resist. "I won," he remarked with a smile, his voice full of confidence. I did not react. I just walked away. I grinned and thought, Lauren is now trapped. She has lost her family. Dylan live-streamed his video, but he only had a few hundred views. But I had another copy, which we forwarded to her firm so she could bid her job farewell. Now, Dylan isn't as wealthy as he pretends to be. The money belonged to his wife. He will not divorce her. In that scenario, Lauren will always remain a supporting character, the other woman, as they say. So, the next step in the strategy was to wait the requisite 7 months for a divorce. The deal went well. Lauren received $8,000, with her lawyer taking the same amount. His costs totaled $900, but Lauren believed it was a reasonable bargain. I didn't disagree. As I stood outside the court, I saw them, Lauren and Dylan, looking as if they'd won. I approached them with calm assurance, knowing what I was doing. "So, when are you two getting married?" I inquired. Dylan hissed instantly, his face stiffening. "None of your business," he fired back. But Lauren, who was constantly attempting to keep control of the situation, looked at him and then back at me, her eyes filled with confusion. "Dear, when are you divorcing your wife?" Dylan squirmed uneasily, avoiding my look, as he said, "Just a few more days," as if it were a small element in his well-planned strategy. I couldn't resist sticking my nose in. "Dylan, I hope you're not lying to her," I replied, seeing Lauren's face become more doubtful. After all, she left her family, her job, her food bill, her husband, all for her true love. "You." Lauren's face flushed with rage, and she yelled at me, her voice shaking with impatience. "It's none of your business." Dylan, who seemed keen to defuse the situation, stepped in. "Let's go home," he replied, attempting to bring the situation back under control. But as they turned to depart, I realized I had accomplished my purpose for being here. Lauren's mind was filled with uncertainty, and I watched them walk away, knowing that my comments had struck a chord. I watched them get into the vehicle, my gaze narrowing as they drove away. They had no idea that Megan had hidden a listening device in the vehicle to keep track of Dylan's plans, which I could access via the cloud. As I listened, Lauren's voice broke through. "So, how long will your divorce take?" Dylan's voice was calm and deliberate. "I just need to get my wife to sign her shares to me. Then I can divorce her. There's a prenuptial in place, so I need to take care of that as well." Dylan was as typical as I expected. I exited the program and sent the file to Megan. Within minutes, my phone rang. That was her. "Let's meet up," she said. "Time for the next phase of the plan." I met Megan at Giovanni's, and the expression on her face told me all I needed to know. She was boiling, her eyes flaming with rage. "He was on the streets, and I made him who he is today," she said, her voice shaking with wrath. "And that thankless jerk is spending my money on that woman. And now he wants to rip me for my shares. I'll make sure he pays for this." I placed a hand on her arm to halt her. "Why get nasty? Save her the fun," I responded, my voice remaining cool. "He wants your shares? Well, turn the tables on him." She gazed at me, still furious, but the fire in her eyes faded gradually. I could see the wheels spinning in her head as she began to consider the situation. I grinned to myself, knowing that the next phase was going to happen. I leaned in and explained everything to her, describing what needed to happen next. Megan listened closely, her face changing from wrath to something far deeper. Her face was gradually covered with an unpleasant smirk. "You are an evil man, Mr. Lee," she said, her voice full of praise. "I'm all for it. Let's do it." Megan gave me a card before leaving. "Mr. Lee, for your assistance, pay raise $1 million," she continued, her voice silky and frigid. I grabbed the card from her, my fingertips stroking its edges. I watched her go away. I had no idea that divorcing a wife would make me affluent. I put the card in my pocket and went away. The next day, I strolled into the BMW showroom, a rush of exhilaration filling me as I entered through the doors. I saw Lauren and Dylan very instantly. They noticed me too, and the mockery began. "Why are you here?" Dylan said, his tone laced with disdain. "This isn't a second-hand dealership. The cars here cost money, and you don't have any," Lauren said, her voice cutting through the air. I did not allow their remarks influence me. I merely smiled and remained calm, allowing their efforts to antagonize me fall flat. "Lauren," I replied, my voice calm and steady, "you're just a side piece. I have no inclination to ask a side piece out, let alone marry her." Their faces froze for a time, astonished and perplexed. But I didn't care. I was not here to play their games. I came here for something far larger than their petty remarks. I focused on the automobile I was interested in, the 2017 Mercedes M4, which is a magnificent machine. I asked the salesperson for further information, my curiosity evident. Lauren took a brief peek at Dylan, most likely attempting to outdo me somehow. Without missing a beat, she instructed Dylan to purchase the automobile before he could. Dylan, always the cocky one, stepped in, attempting to impose himself in his typical pompous manner. "He'll buy the car," he assured the salesperson, his tone full of superiority, as if it were a competition. He believed he had the upper hand. Lauren then turned toward me, the same sarcastic expression on her face. "Look, you see? This is how a rich man buys," she added, smiling slyly. I saw Dylan confidently swipe his card. However, it faltered when the deal was refused. He swiped again and again. His confidence was sinking even deeper. I could see fear beginning to set in. He looked across to Lauren, who was still smiling. But her face changed when Dylan attempted to phone Megan. The phone rang repeatedly, but she did not answer. I understood precisely what was going on. Dylan had the auxiliary cards, while Megan controlled the primary ones. And it was obvious that she had closed them all. Dylan scrambled, hoping to save his dignity, but it was too late. I couldn't help but smirk. I turned to Lauren and spoke calmly but pointedly. "That's how an idiot makes a fool of himself." Lauren's face twitched, visibly uncomfortable, but I was not finished. I took out my own card and presented it to the sales representative. "Please charge the full amount," I responded confidently. The purchase proceeded well, and the salesperson verified that it was successful. Lauren's mouth fell, and I couldn't help but enjoy the moment as she stared at me wide-eyed. "Where did you get that money?" she said, her voice full of skepticism. I grinned, not bothering to respond. "None of your business," I said, turning to walk away. But I couldn't resist. I paused, turned around, and stared straight at Dylan. "If you're not rich, don't act like one," I added, my words pouring with conviction. I turned and walked away, leaving them both to wallow in their own shame. 2 days later, the phone call arrived in the morning, and Dylan responded with his customary arrogance. The lawyer asked him to meet at Megan's office. Dylan did not dispute it. He was too caught up in the celebration, believing he had everything under control. He thought the transaction was complete, and he was on top of the world. Lauren was, of course, at his side, ready to give gasoline to his already inflated ego. She did not hesitate when Dylan informed her about the rendezvous. In her opinion, it was another win to rub in my face. They both arrived in Megan's workplace, and Lauren's arrogance was on full display, as predicted. Without hesitation, she strode inside the office and sat in Megan's chair, as if she owned the place. Dylan did not blink an eye. He let her do it, his hubris obstructing his perception of the situation. After all, in his eyes, he was the new owner of the firm, and Lauren was only playing the part of his better half. Just then, I entered Megan's office. My gaze quickly focused on Lauren and Dylan. Lauren sent me a glance, her lips curled into a sneer. "What are you doing here?" she growled, obviously astonished to see me. I grinned. "I came to watch you two get destroyed." Dylan's expression contorted into a look of astonishment and annoyance. He promptly took out his phone and contacted security, yelling at them to remove me from the office. I did not flinch. 2 enormous guys approached me, but I pulled back slightly and whispered, "Better call Megan and ask if she wants me removed." One of the guys phoned the security chief and informed him of the situation. He called Megan and then went toward us. "She's on her way. She'll be here in 5 minutes." 5 minutes seemed like a lifetime, but the door eventually swung open and Megan entered. Her gaze moved across the room, stopping on each of us before eventually lingering on Dylan and Lauren. "Dylan," Megan murmured, her voice chilly. She turned to face Lauren. "I see you've made yourself comfortable." Dylan faked a grin. "Well, Megan, I assumed this meeting was to finalize things. I'm ready to take over the reins." Megan's lips formed a tiny, knowing grin. Takeover? Is that what you thought this was about? Dylan's confidence waned. Well, yes. I mean, after all, Megan cut him off with a stern voice. Stop. Let me make something very clear. This company is not yours to take over, nor will it ever be. Dylan's cheeks became red as he tried to make sense of the situation. He cast a frantic glance at Brandon, the company's lawyer. Brandon, what is this? Dylan asked. I sent you the papers. Megan signed the company over to me. Brandon opened a slick leather folder and pulled out the same documents Dylan had referenced. Mr. James, Brandon replied calmly, holding the paperwork up. This is your signature here, correct? His finger hesitated on a portion of the page. Dylan leaned forward, his gaze narrowing as he studied the page. Yes, that is mine, Dylan said. Excellent, Brandon remarked, closing the folder with a crisp click. Because with this signature, you've officially agreed to take on all the debts tied to Megan Brown's company, $12 million in total. Dylan's hand rushed out and grabbed the papers from Brandon's grip. His eyes quickly read the tiny print, his face twisting into a disbelieving expression. No, this can't be right. Dylan said. Let me check this again. Brandon did not even blink. You should have checked earlier, Dylan, he replied with a relaxed shrug. The words hit like a blow, and the room became silent. Megan walked forward. I knew exactly what you were planning, Dylan, she stated with a stern voice. But now, as they call it here, is my reverse Uno. Dylan's bravado faded, replaced by a frenzied, almost pitiful desperation. I saw him stagger to the table and grab a glass of water with shaky hands. Sweat beads poured down his forehead, and his shirt clung to him like he'd just run a marathon. Then, to everyone's surprise, Dylan fell to his knees, his voice breaking as he begged. I'm sorry, Megan. I didn't mean to do this. I didn't want to. My eyebrows rose. Dylan, the haughty and pretentious Dylan, was groveling. But what happened next was the real kicker. This woman, he added, pointing a trembling finger at Lauren, she seduced me and made me do all this. The room fell completely quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. I looked at Lauren, and her face was captivating. Her mouth hung open, her eyes wide with shock. She looked like she had just been smacked. This was the guy she had left everything for. The guy she had centered her life on. The guy for whom she had left her family, spouse, and work. And now he was putting her under the bus without thinking twice. Megan fixed Lauren with a hard glare, her words piercing through the tension like a sword. Now, woman, get up from my chair, she said, her tone full of power and disgust. That does not belong to a side chick. It belongs to me. Lauren rose to her feet, flushed with shame, and moved back. The confidence she had shown before was vanished, replaced by a hollow stillness. Dylan, however, remained crouched on the floor, face buried in his hands. Megan did not waste a second. She took out a neat stack of papers from her purse and presented them to Dylan. Here, Dylan, she murmured, her voice full with cynicism. You wanted a divorce from me so you could marry Lauren, didn't you? Well, here it is. Sign it. Dylan's head shot up, and his face changed from desperation to bewilderment. He grabbed the papers and flipped through them with shaky hands. When he realized it, he let out a hoarse scream. I am your husband. I deserve a fair share, he said, his cheeks flushed with rage. Megan's grin grew, but did not reach her eyes. Yes, you did, she said coldly. If you hadn't cheated with this woman, she nodded at Lauren, whose eyes were now filling with tears. And remember the prenup my father made you sign? Megan proceeded, her sentences harsh and deliberate. I'm enforcing it. You will leave this marriage exactly as you came in, without a single penny. Dylan opened his lips, but no words came out. He seemed absolutely defeated. Megan leaned in slightly, her voice sinking to a deathly silence. And as for the company's debt, she told me, consider it my wedding gift to you and Lauren. Megan directed her security team, who moved with precision, taking up Dylan and escorting Lauren out of the building. Neither of them fought very hard. The humiliation was total. I observed the scene from my place in the corner, a contented grin pulling on my lips. The room became silent as everyone left, leaving just Megan and myself. I rose up and strolled up to her desk, placing my hands casually on the edge. Well, he said, it's time for me to leave. Megan gazed up at me, her piercing eyes shining with something I couldn't identify. Not so fast, she said, standing elegantly and reaching for a drawer. When she looked back at me, she was holding a sleek black card. My eyes widened, and I could not contain my excitement as she carefully put it on the desk. This card, she continued quietly and deliberately, has $5 million on it. My heart skips a beat. But Megan smirked. There's a second option. Become my husband. I looked at the card and then at Megan. My head raced, but my lips moved more quickly. Can I take both? I inquired, half joking but totally optimistic. Megan grinned and moved closer. Before I could respond, she kissed me. And let me tell you about that kiss. It wasn't just excellent. It was thrilling. Better than any kiss ID ever received. It felt like ID finally closed a deal I hadn't known ID been working on for months. A year had gone, and life had changed in ways I could not have predicted. Samantha and I were now married and living in a massive house that seemed more like a fortress than a home. It was everything ID ever wanted: luxury, comfort, and success. I had a beautiful, bright wife at my side, and my job skyrocketed, earning me more than I ever imagined. But there was a peculiar feeling of joy in it all because I had finally gotten what I desired. In a sense, I had earned it, but not without making some difficult decisions along the way. I couldn't help but giggle at myself. It was ironic how things had turned out. Kyle was certain that his life was improving, that he would emerge victorious, and that he could leave his marriage and pursue larger dreams. But destiny had other ideas for him, as it often does for individuals like Kyle. I remember the hospital visit. I strolled in with those blue roses, making a mockery of everything he expected. And when I looked at him laying there, bruised, shattered, and with no alternatives, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Perhaps it wasn't about being vengeful, but about delivering a strong message to people who believe they can get away with anything. He would never be able to accomplish much of anything again. Lauren's life was in ruin. She attempted to maintain her masquerade, but the reality of the situation had caught up with her quicker than she had imagined. The family she had deceived was gone, and her brief love affair with Dylan had ended as swiftly as it had started. Nobody truly believed in their story anymore. And me? Well, I could not be happier. I had what I want, and I had worked for it. The gratification of watching people who had harmed me suffer the repercussions of their actions was the icing on top. Samantha and I created our lives from the ground up, and no one could touch us. Some may argue that vengeance does not provide genuine happiness, but to such individuals, I say this: it is not always about happiness. Sometimes it is about ensuring that those who deserve it get precisely what they have earned. Because, to be honest, individuals who insult others do not get a second shot in life. Life has become simpler. I have 3 Labradors and don't need anything additional. My job is thriving, Samantha is at my side, and I am not looking back. It's a weird sort of calm to know that your adversaries are no longer standing in your way. But let us not become emotional. This is a tale about justice, and justice always finds those who believe they can avoid it. So, here we are. And as my narrative concludes, I'll leave you with this thought: life isn't always about being the nice guy. Sometimes it's about being the winner. And believe me, I won. It had been 2 years since everything changed, and I had settled into a lifestyle that most people would envy. Samantha and I were now married, and our life together was all I had ever desired. The home we lived in was a stunning testimony to the life I had built for myself, and I couldn't help but be impressed by how far I had gone. But that year marked the beginning of something much more fundamental than luxury. It served as a reminder of how much power, control, and revenge might alter someone's future. The first several months after what had happened were a blur of delight. It was heartwarming to see Lauren's life fall as she attempted to rebuild her broken reputation. I expected her to attempt to redeem herself, maybe by winning back her family or her work, but this never occurred. Instead, she became a shell of her old self, a ghost of the confident lady she once was. Dylan, too, had his own fall from favor. He had been so sure of himself, so certain that his relationship with Lauren would offer him everything he desired. That illusion was destroyed as it became evident that he was nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. He attempted to pick up the pieces and save his own image, but it didn't take long for everyone to see him for who he actually was: a self-absorbed, manipulative liar who didn't care who he walked on as long as he got what he wanted. Dylan's fall, however, was considerably less pleasurable to watch than Kyle's. The one guy who had been the source of all my wrath and hatred was now nothing more than a broken man in a hospital bed. And when I went to see him, flowers in hand, I couldn't help but feel that everything was falling into place precisely as it should. Those blue roses were not a sign of compassion, of course. They reminded him of how delicate his world had become. He had been so sure of himself, so certain that he could get away with anything. But, In the end, he had failed to shield himself from the repercussions of his own conduct. The physicians informed me that his prognosis was not good. Kyle would be unable to father a kid again. The news was not only painful, but also lyrical. After all he had stolen from me, after all the years of deception and betrayal, the cosmos had a way of placing him just where he should be. He'd never be the same. And although it may have been cruel, it felt right. The world did not need more guys like him. But, as much as I enjoyed Kyle's demise, my life was going on. Samantha and I had created a life together that others would envy. We lived in a mansion that would make your mouth drop. It wasn't just about the property. It was about the life that came with it: money, power, luxury, all of the things I had hoped for but never realized would be so easy to get once everything fell into place. But I wasn't finished. That's where Samantha stepped in. She wasn't simply my wife. She was an important player in the whole game. She had played a key role in everything, from guaranteeing Kyle's demise to securing our current existence. I could not have made it this far without her. Together, we were unstoppable. I'm not one to believe in destiny, but it was tough to deny how everything had come together perfectly. The money was coming in. My career took off once I was elevated to an even more prominent position. Everything I touched seemed to turn to gold, and Samantha was beside me every step of the way. She was more than simply my wife. She was my equal in everything. We seized control of our fate together. The next months were packed with extravagant parties and high-profile events. Our names have become connected with power, prosperity, and a certain level of dread. I could see the expressions on people's faces as they saw us enter a room. They were not only amazed, but also intimidated. People began to notice that we were no longer the ones being played. We were the ones playing. I frequently thought about the folks who would look down on me and question me. I thought of Lauren, Dylan, Kyle, and everyone else from my past. I wondered whether they could see what had become of me. I wondered whether they understood how much they had underestimated me. But none of it mattered. I had everything I want, and nothing could take it away from me. My job was thriving, my personal life was all I had hoped for, and the individuals who had mistreated me were dispersed, left to face the repercussions of their actions. Of course, there were times when I would reflect on everything, the anguish, betrayal, and falsehoods. However, I did not allow those times dominate me. Instead, I let them motivate me. They reminded me of why I had done what I had done. They reminded me that life doesn't always give you what you want, but it will give you all you need if you're ready to work for it. Samantha and I gradually became used to our routine. We proceeded to expand our empire, tackling new initiatives and making new investments. The mansion was just the beginning. We soon had residences in many cities, luxurious automobiles, and private aircraft. We were not just living the dream, we were the dream. Then came the inevitable moment of success, the problem of keeping it. There were others who wished to bring us down, to destroy what we had accomplished. However, every issue was tackled with precision and planning. We understood how to play the game, and we knew that the higher you go, the tougher it is for those who want to stop you. Samantha and I were always ahead of the game. We ensured that our opponents were eliminated before they could attack. We surrounded ourselves with the brightest brains in business, law, and finance. Nobody could touch us. We'd become untouchable, and it felt just as amazing as I'd anticipated. I was often asked how I had become so successful and how I had turned my life around in such a short period. But I knew the answer would be difficult for the majority of people to grasp. It wasn't simply about money or power. It was about something far deeper. It was all about control. It was about ensuring that I was never in a position to be wounded again. I had learned that in this world, the best way to protect oneself is to be the one making the decisions. And I had done just that. But I knew that, no matter how successful we were, there would always be those waiting for the other shoe to drop. There were always people who looked at me and wondered, is he really that powerful? They'd worry whether my dominion was as stable as it seemed. The fact was that it didn't matter. I had established my foundation on something much more solid than money or celebrity. I had built it on wrath and the vow to never let anybody walk all over me again. Looking back, I realized that everything had led up to this time. Every choice, every moment of weakness, every ounce of pain, they all had a purpose. Everything had been a lesson on how to survive and prosper. And suddenly I was the one with all the cards. Samantha and I had an unlimited future. We had the whole world at our feet, and we were ready to take it all. There was no more glancing over our shoulders or caring about what others thought of us. We'd won, and we wouldn't stop until we got everything. So, as I sit here in my office, Staring out at the city skyline from the penthouse suite of our most recent purchase, I realized something. I'm more than simply a survivor. I am a winner. And nobody has ever questioned me? They learned the hard way that you should never gamble against someone like me. My lives tale has only just began, and I'm only getting started. The rest of them, Lauren, Dylan, and Kyle, are merely footnotes in the tale of how I rose to power. A tale is continuously being written, one step at a time. I've gone a long way since I began, and I'm proud of the guy I've become. The nasty guy won the game. That concludes the last chapter, my friends. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales like this one. Thank you for watching.